Before there was a universe, there was a question. Not asked by any god, because there were no gods yet to ask it. The question was this: can something create itself? Every mythology on Earth eventually collides with this problem and flinches. The Greeks gave the cosmos a mother, Gaia, born from chaos. The Norse gave it a void between fire and ice, and a giant who simply appeared. Even modern physics, for all its precision, cannot say what caused the first cause. It can only say the universe began and stopped there, because the question of what came before breaks the grammar of causality itself. Hinduism did not stop there. It gave the paradox a name, a face, and 4 heads to look at the impossibility from every direction at once. His name is Brahma, and his story is not a story of creation. It is a story of a being who had to become his own beginning, with no one and nothing to begin him. The Rig Veda, composed more than 3,000 years ago, does not claim to know the answer. In its most famous hymn, the Nasadiya Sukta, the hymn of creation, it says that before existence, there was neither existence nor non-existence. There was no death, no immortality, no day, no night. Only that one breathed without breath by its own power. And then it adds a line no other ancient scripture dares to include. Who really knows? Who can declare it? Even the gods came after creation. So who knows from where it came? Out of that uncertainty, later texts, the Puranas, tried to give shape to the shapeless. They describe a golden egg, the Hiranyagarbha, floating alone on the cosmic waters of dissolution. Inside it, the seed of every universe that would ever exist. Vishnu, the preserver, slept upon the serpent Ananta on that infinite ocean. And from his navel grew a single lotus stem, reaching upward through nothingness until it bloomed. Sitting at the center of that lotus was Brahma. He opened his eyes on a universe with no landmarks, no sky, no ground, no other being to tell him who he was. His first task, before he could create anything else, was to create the very idea of direction, up, down, and the 4 cardinal points, because none of them existed yet. This is why he is shown with 4 heads. Not for beauty, but because he had to look every way at once, into a void that offered no orientation at all. Here is where the story stops being simple mythology and becomes something closer to philosophy. Brahma looked around his lotus and saw no world to rule, no beings to guide, no cause for his own existence. So he did the only thing left to do. He turned his attention inward and performed tapas, fierce, focused meditation, not to create the universe yet, but to understand his own origin. And in some tellings, in that meditation, he is his own answer. He is Svayambhu, the self-existent one, self-born, arising from Vishnu's will, but requiring no external hand to shape him into being. This is the paradox Western philosophy calls the problem of the uncaused cause. Aristotle needed one, an unmoved mover that starts every chain of causation without itself being caused. Medieval theologians built entire arguments for God around this exact gap. But where those traditions describe the uncaused cause as sitting outside the universe, untouched by it, Hindu cosmology does something stranger. It puts the uncaused cause to work immediately and gives him a body, 4 mouths, and a task list. Brahma's first act of true creation was not a world, it was mind. From his thought he generated the Manasaputras, the mind-born sons, sages who would become the ancestors of gods, demons, and humans alike. But there's a darker thread here too, one most retellings skip. Some Puranic texts say that in the effort to fill the emptiness, Brahma also generated a being from his own shadow, Kali, not the goddess, but a personification of illusion and discord, a reminder that a creation born from loneliness carries loneliness inside it. And it was in this same period, according to the Shiva Purana, that Brahma made a claim he could not defend. He grew a 5th head, obsessed with his own reflection, and declared himself supreme above all gods, including Shiva. Shiva's response was immediate and absolute. With a single motion, he severed that fifth head. The punishment was not just physical. Shiva decreed that Brahma would never again be worshipped in temples the way Vishnu and Shiva were. The creator of everything, cursed to near invisibility for the one flaw a self-made god could not survive: pride in his own reflection. Today, across all of India, there are only a handful of temples dedicated to Brahma. The most famous sites in Pushkar, Rajasthan, a single major shrine to the god who made everything in a country with tens of thousands of temples to the gods he made. Meanwhile, Vishnu and Shiva are worshipped in nearly every town. Some traditions say this is Shiva's curse still holding. Others offer a quieter, more philosophical reading. Brahma's role was to create, not to be worshipped for creating. Once the universe exists, the act of creation recedes into the past. What remains present, what people need help with now, is preservation and transformation. Vishnu sustains what exists. Shiva destroys what must end, to make room for what comes next. Brahma's work, once finished, simply finishes. He becomes the origin point everyone stands on, but rarely looks back toward. There is something almost unbearably human in that. The four-headed god who solved the impossible problem of self-creation, who looked in every direction at once so that direction itself could exist, is remembered by history as an afterthought. Not because he failed, because he succeeded so completely that his work became invisible, absorbed into the fabric of everything that came after him. So return to the question that started everything: can something create itself? Modern cosmology still cannot answer it. Philosophy still circles it without landing. But 3,000 years ago, a civilization looked directly at that impossibility and refused to look away. They didn't resolve the paradox. They gave it a name, a shape, 4 faces, and a lotus to sit on. They let the contradiction exist visibly at the center of everything. Maybe that's the real teaching hidden inside Brahma's myth. Not an answer to how something comes from nothing, but permission to sit inside the question, the way Brahma sat inside his, and to keep looking in every direction anyway. But Brahma's story raises a question we haven't answered yet. If he is Svayambhu, self-born, self-existent, then where did the knowledge come from? Where did he learn how to create anything at all? The texts give us an answer, and it's older than Brahma's lotus. It's older than the gods themselves. Before there was a universe to shape, there were sounds, eternal, uncreated, waiting to be heard. The Vedas. That is where this story truly begins. Before there was writing, before there were books, before a single word had ever been carved into stone or pressed onto a page, there was sound. Somewhere in the river valleys of ancient India, a sage sat in silence, and in that silence, something arrived. Not invented, not composed, heard. The ancient rishis did not claim to have written the Vedas. They claimed to have received them, sound existing before the one who spoke it, truth existing before the mind that perceived it. For over 3,000 years, this knowledge would travel from mouth to ear, from teacher to student, without a single letter written down. No parchment, no ink, only breath, memory, and devotion. Today, we call this body of knowledge the Vedas, but that word barely begins to explain what they are. What exactly are the Vedas? And why does something composed in the Bronze Age still shape how 1 billion people understand the universe today? The word Veda comes from the Sanskrit root vid, to know, not knowledge as information, knowledge as direct seeing. The kind of knowing that arrives whole, the way light arrives in a dark room. In the Hindu tradition, the Vedas are called Shruti, that which is heard. This is a crucial distinction. Most sacred texts in human history were written by someone, a prophet, a scribe, a council of elders. The Vedas were not. Hindu tradition holds that the Vedas are a Purusha, without human author. Not myths written about the divine, but sound itself, cognized by sages whose minds had become still enough, clear enough, to perceive it directly. The rishis were not authors, they were witnesses. This is why precision mattered so much. If the Vedas were not composed but received, then changing a single syllable wasn't an edit. It was a corruption of something greater than any human mind. That single idea, that sound itself could carry a kind of truth older than language, is the key that unlocks everything else the Vedas contain. The Vedas are not one book, they are four, and each one exists for a different purpose. The oldest of the four, and the oldest surviving text in any Indo-European language. Over 1,000 hymns, 10,600 verses, organized into 10 books called mandalas. The Rig Veda is poetry addressed to the forces that ancient people watched shape their world. Agni, the fire that transforms. Indra, the storm that breaks the drought. Varuna, the order beneath the stars. These hymns are not simple prayers for rain or protection. Buried inside them are some of the oldest philosophical questions ever written down. In the 10th book, one hymn dares to ask what existed before the universe began, and admits astonishingly that perhaps not even the gods know the answer. Where the Rig Veda is poetry, the Yajur Veda is instruction. It is the priest's manual, the exact words spoken at the sacrificial fire, timed precisely to each ritual action. It exists in two major forms: a black Yajur Veda, where verse and commentary are woven together, and a white Yajur Veda, where they stand cleanly apart. Buried in its final, youngest layers are some of the most influential Upanishads ever composed. Proof that even a manual for ritual precision eventually opens into pure philosophy. The smallest of the four Vedas, and in many ways the most beautiful. Nearly all of its verses are drawn from the Rig Veda, but transformed, turned into melody. The Samaveda is not new poetry, it's the Rig Veda given a singing voice, chanted by the priests who led the sacred rites. This is the root of something enormous. The Samaveda is considered the foundation of Indian classical music. Every raga sung today has a lineage that reaches back to priests, chanting hymns beside a sacrificial fire 3,000 years ago. The last, and in many ways the most human of the four, where the other three orbit the fire altar and the priestly class, the Atharva Veda, steps into ordinary life. Healing, marriage, birth, protection from disease, even the anxieties and hopes of daily existence. It's all here. It's considered the earliest textual source for what would become Ayurveda, and it captures something the other Vedas don't. The texture of what it actually felt like to be alive in that world. Together these four are the Trividya, and the fourth, the threefold knowledge of Rig, Yajur, and Sama, joined by the earthbound wisdom of the Atharva. 4 different doors into the same house. Each of the 4 Vedas is itself built in 4 layers. And understanding this structure is like discovering that a temple has a foundation, walls, a roof, and a spire, each serving the one above it. The Samhitas, the mantras themselves, the hymns and verses, the oldest layer, the raw material, the Brahmanas, commentary, explanations of what each ritual means and precisely how it must be performed. The Aranyakas, the forest texts, meditations composed for those who had left ritual life behind for contemplation in the wilderness. texts that begin to turn ritual into symbol, the Upanishads, the final layer, and the one that would change philosophy forever. This is the architecture. You begin with sound, move into ritual, then into symbolic meaning, and finally arrive at pure, metaphysical inquiry. It's the exact shape of a spiritual life. Action first, then understanding, then transcendence. Long before karma became a household word, the Vedas already contained a concept doing similar work. RTA. Arta is cosmic order, the principle that makes the sun rise on schedule, the seasons turn in sequence, and moral action carry consequence. It is the idea that the universe is not chaos governed by the whims of gods, but a coherent, patterned reality, and that gods themselves are bound to uphold it. Ritual, in the Vedic mind, was never superstition. It was participation. Every fire lit correctly, every mantra spoken with the right accent, every offering made at the right moment. These were small human acts of alignment with the same order that keeps the stars in their courses. This is the seed from which karma would eventually grow, the understanding that action and consequence are woven into the structure of reality itself, not handed down arbitrarily by an angry sky. Something happens toward the end of the Vedic corpus. The questions change. The earlier hymns ask, how do we perform this sacrifice correctly? The Upanishads ask something else entirely. What is actually real? This is where two of the most consequential ideas in the history of human thought are first written down, Atman and Brahman. Atman is the innermost self, not the personality, not the body, not even the mind, but the silent witness underneath all of it, the awareness that is aware of thought itself. Brahman is the ultimate reality, the single, unbounded ground of existence out of which everything, every star, every self, every thought arises. And the great insight of the Upanishads, whispered across centuries of forest hermitages and riverside teaching circles, is this: Atman and Brahman are not two things. The self you carry inside you and the infinite reality that contains the universe are, at the deepest level, one and the same. This single realization is the philosophical seed of nearly everything that follows in Indian thought, the goal of yoga, the aim of meditation, the promise at the center of moksha, liberation itself. Long before Greek philosophers asked, "What is being?" Vedic sages in forest schools were already asking it, and answering with a claim so bold it still reshapes minds today. You are not separate from the universe. You never were. Here is where the story becomes almost impossible to believe. For roughly 1,000 years, none of this was written down. And yet the Rig Veda survives today essentially without variant readings. A single, unified text, preserved across 3 millennia, letter for letter, tone for tone. How? The rishis developed one of the most sophisticated memory systems in human history. Students didn't simply memorize the hymns in order. They learned them forward, then backward, then in shifting, overlapping patterns, pairs of words recombined and re-recited, called Kramapatha. Groups of 3, interlinked and repeated, called Ganapatha. Every method designed to force the mind to hold the text from every possible angle, so that no single point of failure could ever corrupt it. This wasn't about content alone. Vedic pitch accent, the precise musical tone of each syllable, was preserved with the same rigor as the words themselves, because in the Vedic understanding, sound was the meaning. Change the tone, and you hadn't just mispronounced a word. You had broken the mantra's power. Students lived with their teachers for years in Gurukul, households of learning, absorbing not just verses but a way of life built entirely around exact transmission. In 2003, UNESCO recognized this achievement for what it is: a masterpiece of oral and intangible human heritage, not a curiosity, not folklore, one of the most rigorous educational technologies ever devised by any civilization, anywhere, at any point in history, built not from writing, but from breath, memory, and an unwavering devotion to precision. So, what exactly are the Vedas? They are poetry to the forces that shape existence, a manual for sacred ritual, a treasury of the world's oldest surviving music, a guide to the struggles of ordinary life, and in their final and deepest layer, a philosophical inquiry so radical, it proposed that the self and the infinite are not two things but one. They are also proof of something almost unbelievable about the human mind: that an entire civilization once trusted memory over ink, and that trust preserved a body of knowledge across 3,000 years without a single page. The Vedas never claimed to be the last word. They called themselves what was heard, an invitation to listen again, to sit in the same silence the rishis once sat in, and ask the same questions they asked beneath a sky none of us have ever truly stopped looking up at. What existed before the universe began? Who or what truly knows? Perhaps, as the Rig Veda itself admits, only the silence knows for certain. The universe is not chaos, it is consciousness, vast, ancient, and watching. The journey begins now.